Coming up next on the Jeff Crilley Show, he was arrested more than 45 times. He spent 6 years in prison, and now he goes around the country teaching people how to free themselves from a prison of their own making. His incredible journey just ahead.
Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's icebox.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show.
Well, I gave 300 speeches a year for 6 straight years, in addition to my TV job back in the early 2000s. And I got to be a decent speaker, but I can't hold a candle next to my next guest. Keenan Williams, he's an author, entrepreneur, motivational speaker, and my friend. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. I appreciate
Absolutely.
that.
Well, first of all, I want you to kind of introduce yourself to the audience and the kinds of speeches you like to give the crowds who are gathered to hear your message.
Okay. I mean, I talk about a diversity of things, and the reason I do that is because I want everyone to understand the power of being an American and the ability that we have to be successful. So I talk to kids. I talk to kids about financial literacy. I talk to kids about banks, bank accounts, investments. I talk to people on drugs, alcohol, addiction centers. I go into trauma centers. I have a counseling facility, actually. I go into places like Toyota, and I talk about leadership, what that looks like, what those roles are, what that lane is, how to teach. I teach people how to be successful. Different laws that lead up to success. I talk to police officers. I talk to politicians. Everything's about people.
And when Keenan speaks, people lean in because his message is
They do.
His message is so powerful. In fact, I found a video. This was done by WFAA Channel 8 some 6 years ago. Let's go ahead and roll that now.
There are plenty of people who believe you should lock up a criminal and then throw away the key. But then there's this story, a convict who years later thanked the cop who sent him to prison. Kevin Reese explains in this WFAA original.
The streets of Grand Prairie were once the playground of a young man named Keenan Williams, a high school dropout whose mugshots could fill their own book. A drug dealer, a crack addict, an armed robber, arrested and jailed 45 times.
I share my story and I talk about the things that I've gone through.
So why, on a late October morning,
But I went to prison for aggravated robbery.
was he here,
I've arrived.
telling his story
I started kicking in drug houses and robbing people. That's why I got shot 5 times.
to a group of Grand Prairie police officers?
Because this is not supposed to happen. This doesn't make sense.
Well, let's back up to the state prison mugshot of a skinny little kid on his way to prison for 6 long years.
I just started robbing drug houses because I knew all the drug dealers because that's who I was. That's how I ended up getting shot so many times, being an idiot.
But this isn't just a story about a self-professed reformed idiot. It's also about who the ex-con is sitting next to.
I care about people. It's just who I am.
This is retired Detective Alan Patton, and on one day back in 1993, with Keenan's world of drugs and guns and run-ins with the law closing in around him,
Keenan reached out to me and asked for 24 hours to basically say goodbye to his family.
he offered Keenan his first moment of respect.
I basically instructed the police officers in Grand Prairie to leave Keenan alone for 24 hours, and they did.
And so Keenan, the drug dealer, the toughest thug in Grand Prairie, willingly turned himself in.
You didn't judge me. You did your job. You were not a bad police officer trying to arrest me because I was a black man. The way you conveyed it, for that moment, I accepted the responsibility of that crime. Man, that sealed the deal for me. I knew right then that I knew my life was about to change. I'm about to go to prison for a long time. But at least going to prison, I'm not going to be doing crack cocaine anymore. I don't have to worry about hurting people anymore. I don't have to worry about people shooting me anymore.
I've always believed that you give respect, you get respect in return.
When you did, I respected you.
Fast forward then, those 6 years in prison, and the convict who would read more than 200 books, get his high school diploma, pursue a college degree, and practice the handshake he planned to give to the detective who put him away.
But the first thing I said, but I'm here to thank you, because what you did changed my life.
Because that Keenan Williams is now this Keenan Williams, a successful businessman, a finance specialist, a happy husband and father, a motivational speaker at prisons, at schools, at police departments, whose journey from the streets to prison has also taken him to handshakes with some of the most important people in the country, and then publicly thanked the most important cop who put him away.
I knew in that moment I'd made a difference in a way that I couldn't even imagine. My career was a success because I had something to do with this man making a change in the way he lived life.
That's the effect you have as a police officer. Because what he did in my life, you can do in someone else's life.
So an ex-con tells his story of redemption to whoever will listen, even to the cops who helped put him away.
That regardless of what a man is going through, you can never determine where he ends up.
Because it might end up with a handshake, a thank you for a life saved, but then on second thought, make that 2 lives.
Incredibly proud, as I would be of my own child.
In Grand Prairie, Kevin Reese, Channel 8 News.
Wow, and I love that story. It was so well told by Kevin Reese, and you and I have a mutual friend in Alan Patton. When I was a reporter, I used to get a lot of stories from him.
Amazing guy.
He's a good man, and you have maintained your friendship.
Oh, we've been best of friends since I went down and thanked them in 2001. Wow. I got out of prison in '98, and I waited for that opportunity. So I had a handshake waiting on Alan that I learned in speech class when I was in prison. I went to college while I was in prison for those last 2 years. And it was that 180-degree angle, symbolized friendship, the touch, and I waited for that moment. And so, yeah, we've been friends ever since then. Just an amazing guy.
Help me take everybody back to the turning point. I mean, when did you turn your life around?
The turning point in prison is when I made a conscious decision. Number one, I got saved in prison after 4 years and asked Jesus Christ to be my Lord and Savior. And it wasn't religion that changed me. It was the relationship of learning who he was and who I was. And so I was a little different in there. I didn't sit with all the other guys on the front row, and I really took a lot of time to study, because I would read things that talked about, my people perish for one reason, and that's a lack of knowledge. So I said, if you perish for a lack of knowledge, that means that I can flourish with an abundance of knowledge. Mm. So everything I would read, I would look at the opposite. I read over 248 books in 2 years because I understood that education would be one of the keys to, or the foundation of my success. I believe in 5 things in America. You have education, access to opportunity, access to mentorship, access to the know-how, and then access to capital. So I started with education because I didn't want to be limited in my audience and who I could speak with. I knew I would be a speaker.
Sure.
And it also taught me while I was being educated. It's crazy because they wouldn't allow me to get in school when I was in prison because I was a gang member. I quit high school with 2 weeks left to join a gang. And so that's why I got shot so many times or did all the robberies. But they wouldn't let me in school in prison because I was a gang member. Mm. So I wrote the warden over 150 letters asking them to please let me in school. I'm no longer in the gang. I'm in church, live for Jesus, just give me an opportunity. And then one day, after 150 letters, I saw the warden walking across the courtyard. And I knew he was there because all the radios, the guards, everything changes when the warden, because he's like the president. And Jeff, I saw him up there, and I knew in my heart that was my opportunity to say what I've been saying in the letters, but I could do it in face to face. And man, I'm going around all these people, and the guards like, Williams, get in line. I said, I got to talk to Warden Jones. Williams, get in line. You can't do that. But I just kept going around. And I finally get close enough to him, and I yelled his name. I said, Warden Jones. He turns around with this big 10-gallon hat. He turns around, he looks at me. He says, Williams, I know who you are. If you don't write me any more letters, I'll let you in school. I said, yes, sir, that's all I wanted. So that moment taught me that a character of excellence and persistence would demand an opportunity when there's not one.
Wow.
So when I set the goal and I knew what I wanted, I just couldn't quit. And that's what I teach people. Set the goal, put the prize out there. You can't change. I could never change my history. Yes. None of us can. But we have an opportunity to write our future. And so I started writing my future.
Well, let's spend a couple more minutes talking about prison because although I've never been in prison before, they say that prison is a place where people learn to become a better criminal.
That you can. You have choices to make, you know. And one of the first choices that I learned when I began to read is I had to make a decision, and it was in the law of subtraction. And I call it the law of subtraction because I started subtracting wrong people, wrong characteristic traits, wrong ideas, wrong thought processes, wrong places, wrong things. And I subtracted that opportunity to become a better criminal because I decided that was not who I was anymore. I had to decide who I was not. And in deciding who I was not, Jeff, as I began to read and walk and learn and study and pray, I discovered who I was. So when I discovered that, I never had to worry about going back to who I was not because that was no longer my character. That's why I tell people, you know, I haven't had a drink or drug since 1993. I mean, it's been 30 years for me.
And you just made it,
I never went to NA, I never went to AA, I never went to any 12 steps. I don't knock those things, you do what it takes for you. But for me, I was able to get the perfect deliverance at one moment. And that was, I decided who I was not and embraced who I was. And the new Keenan was not a drug addict. He was not a drug dealer. He was not a criminal. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I began to educate myself from that point. Haven't had a desire for drugs or alcohol since 1993, just like that. Cigarettes, anything, done, no more.
Wow.
It was all an identity crisis.
It
was all an identity crisis, man.
That's so inspiring. You also co-wrote a book with some very prominent authors. We're going to put the book.
The Breakthrough was cool.
Breakthrough, and look at some of those names.
Johnny
Les
Wembry,
Brown, yes.
and Les Brown up there, and
Amazing.
Michaela. It was a great book. You know, I'm actually preparing for my own book now, but that book, The Breakthrough, was good because it was a conglomeration of a lot of success stories.
Yeah.
And you know, I love mine being in there because I tell people you can line up 20 people to speak, and nobody's going to say what I say.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to operate the way I operate because my situation is different. You know, I had to learn the law of preparation. I had to learn how to prep that ration in my life, that little small victory, and I would take it and water it and nourish it, and it began to get greater and greater and greater. I learned the law of honor when I was in prison. I started honoring guards, inmates, people, things. Even where I was at, I began to honor that moment. Does that make sense?
It does.
And then, because see, honor, you know, I learned about honor. Honor opens a door that your gift cannot. And a lot of times we get to a place, and because we don't know how to honor that person or understand the protocol of honor for that house or that country or that state, we can't enter into the right places. But it starts with honor.
Okay, and when they turn this story into a movie,
we're working on that right now.
Who plays you?
We're working on that. actually, been working on the movie for like 2 years.
Have
right?
you? It does.
It's going to be pretty cool when we finish it. I've been the hold up. Just busy working, building, you know.
Can you write a little cameo for me as the intrepid reporter?
Don't worry about it, I got you. Don't worry about it, I got you.
All right, we only have a couple of minutes left, so why don't you look right into the camera on the left?
You know what, Jeff, and I want to say this because this is very, very important. Growing up as a black man, in case you didn't know I was black, I'm black. I just thought I'd let everybody know. I'm pushing a lot of people to understand the importance of like school choice.
Yeah.
And, you know, to share where I've gone to where I'm at now, not that I have arrived, because there's a lot more that I want to do. I want to change millions of lives. That's my goal. I want to change millions of lives. I want to educate them in finance, teach them how to use their credit, put them in a space of financial free enterprise.
Yes.
How to leverage that, open their own businesses, and really have a better life. So I'm teaching that. I've been a millionaire twice. I've been broke 3 times, okay? But going to school was really a deciding factor for me later on in my life, because I grew up in the hood being where the black people were back then, you know, the 60s. But there were like 4 streets in my community that were bused to the neighborhood.
Wow.
Are you with me?
Yeah.
It was the busing system in the 70s, 73. Right. So I grew up in the hood where it was all black and Hispanic, but then I was bused to 98% white schools. So I learned how to operate in both cultures. I became very familiar, very comfortable. If it's a room full of white people, I'm fine. If it's a room full of black people, I'm fine. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because the culture doesn't change my identity. My identity adapts to the culture. So I always wanted to go to school, like an all-black school, and I'm so thankful I didn't, because I know how to speak the language.
Yes.
And I found myself like Moses, man, who, I tell people all the time, sometimes I was like too black to be white, but too white to be black. So I go to the hood, I have to change my language. Like, they say, like, why you talk like white people? I'm like, what does white people talk like? And they'll say, oh, okay, this is where I'm at. And then I change it, and then I go back and I change back here. And it was cool because, when I got in the Bible, it was like, because that used to bother me. Like, in the hood, even though I was in gangs and I was banging and there's all that crazy stuff, they respected my education and my aggressiveness because I was always a fighter,
Right.
But they were always perplexed with my ability to speak and my clarity. But I looked at Moses, who was born a Hebrew, but he was raised Egyptian. So he was too much of a Hebrew to be an Egyptian, but he was too much of an Egyptian to ever be a Hebrew.
Wow.
Are you with me?
Yes.
But in that struggle is where he became one of the greatest deliverers of all time. And so when I saw that, when I'm reading the Bible in prisons, I said, oh, that's it. I'm just like Moses. So now I can speak to all people. And that's the reason why I look for larger platforms, so I can share with people who don't understand what goes on in the hood. Because people look and become very biased and say, well, everyone has choices. Everyone doesn't know about the choices they have.
So in the final minute or so, I want you to look into the camera on the left and talk to the young person who's struggling right now, who's going through something.
One of the most prolific moments in my life is when I accepted responsibility of where I was in my life. And I quit blaming my parents. I quit blaming the system. I quit blaming the white people. I quit blaming the jails and the prisons. I quit blaming everything. And I took responsibility on myself. And then I had to learn that regardless of where I was born, my geographical location, the color of my skin, who my parents were, whether I was born rich or poor, black or white, that didn't matter. I still have the ability, like you have the ability, to be successful. Because your success is not determined on what they did. Your success is determined by what you do. Making the right choices, learning what those choices are, get in the book and start educating yourself. Educated people are successful people. Educated people are successful people. It creates an opportunity to have knowledge to be able to be applicable in every arena that you go to. As a young person, you got to understand there's only one you. Quit spending your time trying to be a duplicate when you're the original. You're the original. You were born a winner. You won a race in your mother's womb that you didn't even know you were in. You're here with a purpose and significance. You're still here because there's something so important inside of you that God hadn't even allowed you to be taken off of the earth. Book, a song, a play, a doctor. I don't know what it is, but there's something in you so important as a young man or young woman that it makes you significant in the earth. Pull out of you what was put in you in seed form. Educate yourself and develop that.
Wow. I'm so inspired by you. We're going to end with the
Thank you, brother. I
website.
appreciate
yes.
that.
Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, brother. I appreciate you.
That's it for now. We'll see you next time.